Hello, everyone. Zoom in a bit. Too close. Perfect. It is I, Garrett Bell, welcoming you to another episode of Monsters of the Mind. I guess I owe you an explanation for, this. Let me explain. So after Vincent got us a hippopotamus, it ran us out of our house, and, basically, we're trying to figure out a way to get rid of the hippo, and Eric was all like, why don't we just go to the Land of Myths and get some magical guy to get rid of it for us? So, we ended up going to the Land of Myths, and, we encountered a fairy. We asked if she could help, and she said, why? And Eric was all like, because that's all fairies are good for, helping out humans. And I guess that, must have been the wrong answer, because the fairy turned us into fairies. So, yeah, that's what happened to us. And, she said we can't turn back until we have an epiphany. I don't know what that means, but I figure that means maybe if I talk about fairies, it'll appease her and she'll turn us back. So, in today's episode of Monsters of the Mind, we're discussing fairies. Now, what is a fairy? That's actually a good question. Well, nowadays, fairies are thought of as humanoid figures, adorned with insectoid wings and magical abilities. Fairies have a long, complicated history. So let's dig in and see what we got. The fairies we have today are derived from the folklore idea of the Fae, or fair folk. And in a nutshell, these guys are more or less used as a term to refer to humanoid creatures with some sort of inhuman attributes. Gnomes, elves, goblins, leprechauns, spirits, angels, demons have all been labeled as fairies at one point or another. And at first, fairies were feared. Yeah, that's right. The idea of fairies being helpful is a recent one. Mythological fairies are said to be very cruel to humans, being a very tricky bunch that would often play very cruel jokes on them, from pulling simple pranks to straight up abducting their children. You did have ways to protect yourself, though. These tricksters were notably weak to iron. That's right, according to legends, you whack a fairy with steel, or I guess expose them in some other way, and, yeah, you kill them, I guess. Maybe. Or weaken them. Much like how silver will kill werewolves and sunlight kills vampires. And in addition, because some believe fairies had connections to demons, it was thought that holy objects could ward them off, and that they feared the sound of church bells. Now, you're probably wondering, if they were so feared and they were considered malicious, why on earth would we call them the fair folk? Well, it's thought to be because it was a way to appease them. After all, humans have already feared them. Why poke the bear's nest by giving them an insulting name? After all, would you directly call something that could very easily kill you an unpleasant nickname? I don't think so. Yeah, quite the contrast. Not only were they feared, but they were much more varied as a concept than just insect-winged humans. So I guess this just raises the question, where did the modern fairy come from? How did fairies go from a catch-all term to what I just described? Unfortunately, there's no real good answer to that question. But what I do know is that it happened sometimes during late medieval Victorian times, as that's when most of the famous stories featuring benevolent fairies came out, like Shakespeare's Midsummer Night's Dream, and of course fairy tales like Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty, and the like. Now, fairies went from a catch-all term for any magic humanoid to a specific being, which again were insectoid-winged humanoids. So after this reinventing, fairies massively changed. Now they were beneficial allies to humanity, and many stories featuring benevolent fairies would be released. However, that's not to say fair folk style fairies are gone completely, as even today you occasionally get stories featuring fairies more in line with how they're described in folklore, being trickster beings and the like. But yeah, fairies had quite the evolution, from trickster spirits to dainty magic users. Wouldn't you say that's an evolution? I would, I guess. Maybe. What do I know, though? Alright, guys, how was that? Did it work? Nah, I don't think so. I don't think so, Garrett. I still feel diminutive. And Catherine, I think she's gone mad with power. Burn, baby, burn! I've never had so much fun in my life! I forgot about how that girl gets around fire. Well, at least Andrew can talk, sort of. Clefandrew, 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 Clefandrew. Well, that's just great. We made a whole video about fairies, and it didn't appease anything. Hey, cheer up, I'm sure something will happen, and hey, since we're fairies, can't we just use our match to get rid of the hippo? Hey, you're right, that's a brilliant idea. What happened? Hey, she said we wouldn't turn back till we had an epiphany. And that was the epiphany? Are you kidding me? Realizing we could have had a solution to our problems with the epiphany? Are you kidding me?